Welcome back to ThinkTech Talks. Today we're talking about west of Asia, where we in the 4 to 5 block here on a given Monday, and the title of our episode is Rockets for Gaza. And our guest is Rafi Boritzer. He's an Israeli. He lives in Honolulu. He's very knowledgeable about this kind of thing, and as we have seen in a number of shows we've done with him in the past, he understands the geopolitics of the area. So important to know about that. And his contribution in terms of his understanding is invaluable for us to understand what's happening on the other side of the world in that area. Welcome to the show, Rafi.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You said now you had some clips you want to play.
Yes, I want to put, when we talk about rockets or weaponry, I want to put it in perspective, get everybody in the mood. I suggest that they take their shoes off, kind of relax.
First, give us a minute or two about what happened here with rockets in Gaza.
For the fourth or fifth time in the past 7-8 years, a ship full of rockets, missiles, if you like, whatever, some of them guided, some of them not, and other weaponry was seized off the coast of Sudan on the Red Sea from a ship that was heading from Iran, and it stopped in Iraq.
Around the bottom there,
right, around Saudi Arabia, around the whole peninsula, the Saudi Peninsula.
Okay.
And about 1/3 of the way up the Red Sea, before the Suez Canal, they were stopped by Israeli commandos, commandeered. The ship was brought to Eilat, the port on the Gulf of Aqaba, Gulf of Eilat area. And you will see from the short videos, these are very short videos, you'll get the idea of the action.
So let me understand. The ship was south of the Suez Canal when it was seized.
Quite a bit, yes.
The only way to get into the Mediterranean is through the Suez Canal.
Right.
So how could they have seized it there and then brought it to Israel?
Well, Israel patrols the Red Sea as a security measure against piracy and hijacking.
Which is at the Israeli south
of Israel,
southeast of part of Israel.
Right. The further south of Israel is the port of Eilat on the Gulf of Aqaba. The Gulf of Aqaba is a closed area. Together with the Gulf of Suez from the Suez Canal, they bleed into the Red Sea. The Red Sea is a wide waterway. On one side you have Egypt, you have Sudan, you have Eritrea, you have Djibouti, and on the other side you have Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen.
So Eilat would be just to the east of the Suez area.
Well, there's a whole peninsula between Eilat and the Suez area. It's like a V,
where
the Gulf of Eilat and the Gulf of Suez come together in one.
Okay, so the Israelis took the ship and they brought it into Eilat, where they
brought it into Eilat.
discovered.
The commandos, Unit 13 of the Undersea Commandos, very legendary unit, captured it, found that well, you'll see.
Okay, let's see. Let's run some clips.
When Israeli forces intercepted a suspected vessel sailing from Iran, this is what they found on board.
The map of
the M302 rocket, manufactured in Syria, is a deadly weapon. Its most advanced model has a strike range of up to 200 kilometers. That's nearly all of Israel from the Gaza Strip to Nahariya, or in other words, from Amsterdam to Brussels. The rockets were shipped from Syria to Iran. There, they were hidden in cargo crates among bags of cement, and secretly stashed aboard a civilian ship. This technique has been used in past smuggling attempts from Iran, including the case of Victoria, which held 50 tons of weapons, the Karine A, which held 50 tons of weapons, and the Frankop, which held 500 tons of weapons. The M302 were first fired at Israel during the Second Lebanon War in 2006. Then they struck major cities such as Haifa and Afula. Now, with a range of up to 200 kilometers, strategic sites like Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Israel's coastal gas fields are under threat, as well as millions of lives.
Okay, well, why don't you describe this one?
Okay, here's when they're finding out what was inside. It was covered by flour sacks. And the crew really had no idea what was on there. This was not an Iranian crew.
And what is on there?
Those are the rockets. They are like projectiles. And you can see the soldiers are inspecting. This is a clip from Israel defense filmmaker.
Mm-hmm. So are these marked as Iranian rockets?
Yeah, they are marked and said that they were Iranian rockets.
And are they particularly sophisticated?
No, but they're lethal. They're very lethal, very heavy, destructive equipment.
Okay, have they been used before against Israel?
Yeah. But this was a particularly big shipment that the Syrians were getting, they had gotten previously, or they had manufactured, and they were delivering through Iran, because they didn't want to be caught by the Israeli patrols on the Mediterranean. And this is the warehouse when they unloaded it after they had seized the ship. These are just some other clips, which give you a little bit of a feeling, for the what was going on. You can see.
Why are they wearing masks?
Because they didn't know what was in those sacks. They didn't want to inhale some kind of
Poison. This was a big take, huh?
Yes, but I think that the amount of publicity it got was really more than perhaps justified, because it's not that unusual an occurrence.
Mm-hmm.
But it depends on the different news, or for political reasons, each side may want to emphasize one aspect or another.
Mm-hmm.
For Israel, it was a publicity coup prior to the Prime Minister going to America to visit President Obama.
Mm-hmm. So what does it take to fire one of these rockets? These are big rockets.
You
Jeez,
need
that's
to have
serious
a
rockets.
launching mechanism, and that came separate.
Like something you'd put on the back of a truck?
Pretty
Little
heavy
trailer.
truck. Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty heavy truck.
And then, but if you move them around, it's very hard to determine exactly where they're being launched from.
Right. These are not that sophisticated in terms of where they land. So they do a lot of peripheral damage, a lot of collateral damage, especially when they go into populated area.
They're not guided throughout the flight. They're just set in a general area.
Yeah, when we're getting into the guided stuff, I think that that would not be allowed in that theater of operations.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the...
This is what this Israeli Defense Force?
Right, this is the cruiser.
Mm-hmm. What, at Eilat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are three major naval bases in Israel, Ashdod, Haifa, and Eilat.
Mm-hmm.
This is when the commando team came back to port.
So they brought the ship back. They searched the ship. They found the rockets. What happened then?
They made sure they interrogated the crew and found out that they really had nothing to do. I believe they were released.
Mm-hmm. And the ship was released?
I believe so, because the ship was not Iranian. It was
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. This sounds like it has sound to it. Yeah. Oh, the reality is unbearable.
So I think it's very important to understand when you live in a small country that's vulnerable to the range of some of these more advanced rockets, you're not getting much sleep at night, especially the ones that are close to the Gaza Strip. And
close being how many miles?
You're talking maybe 10 miles, 12 miles. I mean, these have a range far superior.
So what has been the custom? I mean, they just fire them off in a general direction?
Well,
maybe at some settlement or something?
Yeah, right. And so they try. The damage has been fairly limited because, as I said, they are not guided in a sense. They're not guided missiles. They're not. They don't have a high sense of accuracy. Mm-hmm. But they cause a lot. Their purpose is to terrify people, And they do, and they disrupt your life. If you suddenly get how you call it, an alarm, what do you call those alarms? A bomb alarm? No.
The siren.
When you hear a siren that there's perhaps incoming explosives,
Yeah.
you disrupt the population life. You create a sense of stress. I mean, the children already are worried. They get old. They can't sleep at night. I mean, all kinds of issues like this. I mean, there have been period of crisis in Israel's history where this was a lot worse. I mean, this is only one area of the country. This is a fairly small area of the country. But still, when you consider that Israel traded the control of the Gaza Strip
For peace.
for certain, not peace, but at least no war, and suddenly it continuously comes. And many times
This was exactly what you and I talked about a year ago, when the whole thing with the ship carrying the weapons and the fight in Gaza and the Israelis going in and then making that peace. And we talked about that peace. You and I, we talked about it. I mean, I have it on YouTube right now. And it's what you said last year. It's well, we think we have a peace, but in the Middle East, peace doesn't last that long, and here we are a year later, and that peace isn't working very well.
Well, the concept of peace is perhaps not an accurate one,
but if I make a deal, and I say, look, I'm going to leave you alone in Gaza, just leave me alone, which I think was the nature of the deal. Now here we are. I left you alone, but you're not leaving me alone. What kind of a breach is that?
Well, I think you can never look at any very specific activity, especially in the Middle East, and try to analyze it, because it is meaningless unless it's in context. And the context has to do everything with Israel being there in the first place. Okay, so Israel's from its origin in 1948 and the inception of the idea back in the 1915 area, after Theodor Herzl in Austria and so on, the idea has always been that once Israel was established as a country, and after it was attacked and survived the onslaught of 7 Arab armies in 1948, it knew that there were 3 conditions necessary for its survival. One, it could never let the Arabs unify into a single force. And it's managed to do that. I mean, the Arabs have never been unified. Even though they attacked in 1948, 3 Arab armies, Jordan, Syria, and Egypt attacked in 1967. In 1973, Syria and Egypt attacked, but never the whole united front. Now, in that sense, things are very good.
Mm-hmm.
It's because if you look around what's happening in the Middle East, again, to take you back, this is a condition for Israel's survival, and so you can never let them unify. Next, Israel must determine the time and sequence of any future war. Now you may say, wow, that's a terrible kind of policy. I mean, what about, right from wrong and this? Well, survival dictates that Israel cannot let the Arab nation states determine when there is a war. It always must either surprise them or preempt them. And number 3, Israel can never afford to face an internal opposition from the Arabs it controls in the West Bank and an external war at the same time.
At the same time.
Those are 3 conditions for survival. And now if you look at that context and try to understand what has been going on, or what events, or even when you start looking at the peace talks and so on, they are also again motivated by different factors of how do you achieve peace. And what does it mean, all this negotiation? What does it mean in terms of what kind of negotiations are there anyway, It's very easy when I watch the Israeli press, or I watch the Arab press, or I watch the American press criticize Kerry, or criticize this person, It's always somebody else's fault. No, it's not somebody else's fault. It's everybody's fault. It's not like there's no blameless actors. Everybody has their raison d'etre. Everybody has the motivation built into their stance. And some things may be impossible.
Wait, we're going to take a break.
Okay.
This is ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm Jay Fidell. We're doing West of Asia today in the Monday 4 to 5 block. with Rafi Boritzer. He's an Israeli living in Honolulu, very knowledgeable about the events in the Middle East. Today we're calling our show Rockets for Gaza. We'll be right back after this break.
I'm Hong Jiang. I'm hosting Tuesdays Asia in Review at ThinkTech Hawaii between 4 to 5 p.m. In my shows, we bring to you important issues and events in Asia, issues related to the culture, society, the environment, and history. We want you to be more connected to events happening in Asia and in the world. So see you there.
Aloha, I'm Maria Kashem of ThinkTech Hawaii, and I want to tell you about our ThinkTech talk shows. If you didn't know it, ThinkTech streams video and audio for all of its shows live on the internet from 2 to 5 p.m. every weekday afternoon, and we replay them all night long on Ustream.tv. Visit ThinkTechHawaii.com for our live stream and YouTube links. Raise your awareness on ThinkTech. I'm Maria Kashem, and I'll see you there.
We're back, we're live, we're at ThinkTech Hawaii doing ThinkTech Talks, talking about West of Asia here on Monday, talking about rockets for Gaza, with Rafi Boritzer, a knowledgeable Israeli who knows about these things and who lives here in Honolulu. And we're lucky to be able to have him on the show today. It's Rafi, Dr. Rafi afternoon, if you will.
Thank you.
So please continue, Rafi. What are the implications?
I like to talk about the geopolitics, but I also like history, because I think if you don't study history, if you don't understand history, if you don't come to any conclusions, then you cannot prevent future conflict. You cannot prevent future losses. I think conflict is inevitable, but you want to minimize the losses, because in many cases, one loss ends, as we saw to the Crimeans' distress this week. One loss is
that's the end of the game.
The end of the game, game zero. So I think that when we talked about what it takes for Israel to survive, those are three principles of the establishment of the place, we have to look also now historically what happened in '67. I know it's a long time for most people. Some of our viewers weren't even born during that period. But in '67, Israel preempted it, did that rule that we talked about before. It decided when to attack after the Arabs were already. They were going to pounce, attack, and it preempted them by a few days. They were just getting ready because they were very stylized military in Egypt and Jordan. They had been trained by the best, by the British. But we also know that the British lost one major war. It was called the United States of America. So perhaps not all the battlefield planning.
But this is also a matter of intelligence, isn't it? You have to know the other guy's winding up on you.
And remember that Israel in '67 was facing an enemy that was not a technological society. It didn't have a lot of advanced thinking or tactical or strategic thinking. So they definitely had the advantage, but they understood that to survive, it couldn't survive the massive onslaught. So it had to go first, cut at the knees, so to speak, strategy. Because now also after the '67 war, Israel occupied the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Once the Sinai had gone back to Egypt, it could not allow the hostile population that could cut across Israel. Now, when you look at the West Bank, that's a hostile population in terms of Palestinians. It's only 20 miles between that and the Mediterranean, where you could cut Israel in half. Israel could not allow that to happen. So that's very important. It probably sees it all the time as a survival risk to give that up. Even though as most Israelis would like to have a Palestinian state, a full agreement and so on. But again, even if the Palestinians would like to, the Palestinians themselves are not united. They're separated by the Gaza Strip.
So you could be talking with the wrong person.
So you can always find one side may not agree, and they could always be an adversary. And then we look at the peripheral. What is Jordan doing? Anytime we look at Israel's diplomatic allies in the Arab world, Egypt and Jordan, we have to think, how vulnerable are they? How can they survive? So very, very important issue. What's happening with the two Arab friends? They are vulnerable. What's happening with the non-friends who are scared, who will not attack Israel? And then we're talking about Syria. and Lebanon. Can you control really Lebanon? That has never been controlled by anybody since it was set up in 1923 at the Congress of Versailles with the French Protectorate and got freedom 49 or 50. Everything is fluid. Everything is fluid. It's like trying to play Scrabble, when you're sailing. Have you ever tried that? I've tried that. A few of the pieces go flying up until you learn that you need a magnetic board. So that's the lesson there. Now, so that's condition number one. Keep everybody slightly in balance. Keep everything fluid. Not peace, not war. Keep everything fluid, changeable at a moment's notice. Number two, you need a very strong industrial base. Okay, now Israel has some of the world's best high-tech engineering, science, and so on. Nobel Prize winner, way outpacing for its numbers any other country in the world. It doesn't have the industrial base, though, to produce volumes of jet planes in terms of economy. 8 million people cannot produce the kind of advanced weaponry that you need to sell dozens and dozens of scores of airplanes and ships and so on. So you're dependent upon an advanced industrial ally. Who is that?
U.S.
There we go, U.S. So,
dependent is the operative word, though.
Dependent, right? So that is very, very important. Okay, and once you're dependent, many times though, Israel and American interests are not identical.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you an example. There was a big brouhaha in Israel's aircraft industries when it bought some Boeing 707s, converted them to AWAC airplanes that can, do surveillance and spying, and sold them to the Chinese.
Ooh.
America said, no, no, no.
Can't do that.
Israel had to give the Chinese back their money and their Boeing 707.
Oh, the deal never got consummated then. Oh, good.
Well, I mean, so there is a base in having that. And number three, the other thing we have to look at, the turmoil in the Arab world. Well, now we've been watching it, and in months after months, almost now a couple of years. It's been going on nonstop. What do you do? How do you play that? Okay, and so you try to constantly keep a certain amount of imbalance, homeostasis, equilibrium. Homeostasis, equilibrium. But what came into the play that we are looking at now is several things. One of them is the Egyptian Spring. So you say the Egyptian Spring? Yes, well...
The Egyptian Spring happened after the Gaza incident that we spoke about last.
Right.
Okay.
But the Egyptian Spring is still in play. It's become even more restrictive on the Muslim Brotherhood than it was under Mubarak.
15 of them were arrested this morning or something like that.
Well, it's just they've been totally outlawed. They've been totally outlawed. I mean, even their political party has been outlawed, the party that sponsored their president.
Yeah.
I mean, their president who represented the Muslim Brotherhood is in prison waiting trial.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got some pretty heavy-duty stuff going on.
Yeah.
Now, if we forget a second all the countries that are next to Israel, what if we look to the West? What's happening there? Well, the good news is that Tunisia has become a stabilized democracy in the loosest kind of interpretation of what a democracy is. But let's look a little further down. Let's look at Libya. Libya has become so fragmented. They just were now trying to shoot a ship that one of the more jihadist groups sold oil to the North Koreans, and they just arrested them this morning. And so, but what happened was that a lot of the weapons that had been sold to Gaddafi, that he was supposed to dismantle and take apart, became dispersed to all kinds of groups.
Still in play.
And they all came into the Sinai Peninsula. So not only are the Iranians sending weapons, now the anti-Egyptian regime, the jihadists and the Bedouins that they recruited in the Sinai also have some of these advanced weapons. Why should this concern Israel? Because they reach the Israeli border and they can shoot down airplanes. These are they're like SAM 6 and 7.
And that includes passenger planes.
That's right. That's their natural instinct.
Yeah.
And they are presenting a threat. Now, that was one of the reasons why the military took over from the Muslim Brotherhood, because it was becoming a danger that Morsi could not control along the border to Israel. And that could have provoked an Israeli response. So Israel said, listen, if you bring more forces, we're
going to have to respond.
Well, no, they said to the Egyptian military, bring more forces to control it, otherwise we're going to control it. And so that led to these were some of the imperatives that prompted the military takeover again of the Egyptian government.
Okay.
So that's Egypt. Egypt, now we got Libya, Tunis is okay, Morocco has Israelis and Jews visiting, if they have second passports, no problem. So more or less things are going, forget about, we won't even talk about West Africa, Mauritania, and all the stuff that's happening in Spanish Morocco and so on.
How about Yemen?
Yemen is really interesting. I spent about 6 weeks in Yemen, and it's a wonderful place. You don't want to take anybody you really like with you down there, but...
Maybe you take somebody you don't like.
Very, very interesting place, but Yemen is just like in the 14th century.
Things don't change
No,
much.
they don't change much. And no, it really is. If it didn't have for the British the attraction of being on the cusp of the Middle East, a controlling point into the Middle East through the Red Sea, I think that no one would have paid attention to Yemen. But now it's become another brewing ground and fermentation ground for jihadists and so on. Not that we needed one. But Yemen is really not a danger except to the Saudis, and the Saudis have managed with a tight, firm hand pretty much to keep it down. But the Saudis have their own problem now. They tried to make peace with Israel, but in the middle now came the Syrian war, and it kind of obstructed all that. So Israel is making certain accommodations to the Saudis to try to control the Syrian thing. In the meantime, another country called Qatar, you may know it as the Al Jazeera granddaddy, and the owners of Al Jazeera, with all the American hosts on their shows. America's.
Is it still owned by
sure,
Qatar?
Yeah, sure. And you know what? I think they have a good.
A lot of people think that they're good journalism.
Good journalism, and I say, the only certain topics sometimes they still. But you know what? On the whole, they're reliable as the BBC. I find.
They're trying hard. Yeah.
They're working very hard at it. But Qatar again, Qatar is caught between a rock and a hard place. So it ended up supporting the jihadists in Syria, but it's not the Islam that Saudi Arabia backs. Saudi Arabia is backing the Wahhabis, the Sufism, which is another branch, is also very extreme and very volatile. So that's why I say, if you're trying to look at Israel, and you're trying to look at the weapons in Gaza against Israel, the Muslim Brotherhood in the Hamas over in Gaza, they themselves have to figure out every hour who are they allied with today. So you can see that.
Well, it's unpredictable, isn't it?
It is. You're talking about a cauldron. You're talking about a barbecue. And no one knows when the next gust of wind comes and just blows the flame into another point.
Yeah. Well, does it have to be this way? I mean, is the Middle East, inherently this way? It's been this way for as long as we've been alive anyway, right? I mean, there's nothing new here.
It has to be that way.
Why?
Because there were two experts who engineered it. One are called the French and the other are called the British. And after World War I, they decided that they were going to rearrange the Middle East to their suitability. So they can have oil, they can have control over all the Suez Canal and all the geopolitical entrances into Africa, Asia, and Europe, and then they could control the populations that were kind of left by the Ottomans. The Ottomans had lost the war, that's it. So now they're going to go into the vacuum, set up all these countries under the mandates, the French mandates, the English mandates, and we saw what a good job they did in Iraq, in Syria, in Palestine, in Egypt, everywhere in North Africa. The French and the British took care of it, except that they're far away. That was their big luck.
You said that the Ottomans lost the war.
Right.
And in 1923, Ataturk took over, and
Right.
Turkey made it a Western kind of state.
And now we got another guy Here we got Erdogan,
Yeah.
and he wants to bring back the Islamic State.
He
thought
wants
they
to
could-
roll it all back.
Yeah, he could ingratiate himself with the rest of the Middle East.
Yeah.
So be in control, because as we talked previously, you've got the Ottomans, or the the Turks, you've got the Iranians or the Persians, and you got the Egyptians. Who those are the three powers, the geopolitical powers, and they're still trying to control, because geopolitically they control the land pieces around, and they've got the people, and they've got the difference is that the Egyptian people, for the large part, are not educated, they're not high tech. On the other side, you've got the Turks, who are trying to be more industrialized and are probably one of the major players in Europe in the next 20 years. And then you've got the Persians, who've got high tech, got intelligent people, got educational institutions, but the leadership is trying to combine, military entrepreneurship, having the military control all kinds of economic bases and levers, and then
That's never healthy.
and then have the religion, which is, this is the one thing, even in Israel, where you have a lot of interference by the religious organization or the religious political levers trying to control. They've never been able to do it because they never were interested in the machinations of an economy. They're only interested in having the crumbs from the political power structures, kind of feed them to stay out of the way. But they don't have access to the high tech and so on. So this is the geopolitical structure, the three pieces, all it's playing. Now we can see also with the whole Crimea things with the Russians, the American relations and the European relations with the Russians have been damaged. Not that the Russians were doing much behind, they were working strictly in their interests. Now, will they still working on Syria and Iran in their interests? Maybe. Maybe that's the only card they have left to play.
We're going to come back to this in a minute. This is ThinkTech Talks. We're talking about West of Asia today with Rafi Boritzer, very knowledgeable about the area. And we're calling this show Rockets for Gaza. And we're seeing all the chess pieces on the board. Now, after this break, we'll see how they may play out, how they affect the rockets for Gaza, and we'll see what all of that may mean for Israel and for stability in the Middle East. We'll be right back. Castle & Cooke, Hawaii. Investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state. Collateral Analytics, empowering the real estate industry to make better informed property investment decisions. The Foreign Trade Zone, bringing the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone programs to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. Galen Ho, a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company. Hawaiian Electric Company, and its affiliates Maui Electric and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island. The Hawaii Energy Policy Forum, incorporating diverse perspectives to design a flexible and forward-looking energy strategy. Hawaii Energy, the state's energy and efficiency program created to help Hawaii's residents and businesses adopt a clean energy lifestyle. Hawaii Gas, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future. Hawaii Pacific Health, bringing technology and teamwork together to transform healthcare in Hawaii. The High Tech Development Corporation, attached to DBED, is the state's leading technology agency. The Scheidler Family Foundation, supporting educational, cultural, and charitable organizations, including ThinkTech. We're back, we're live, we're ThinkTech Talks here on a given Monday in the 4 to 5 block in West of Asia. We're talking about rockets for Gaza with Rafi Boritzer, Dr. Rafi Boritzer. He is very knowledgeable and is an Israeli, and we get from him the dynamics of the place. So you've described the chessboard and potential players. We've come to the conclusion, sadly, that you can't predict what happens there, that the only thing that's predictable is that it's unpredictable, I suppose. But how do you think this is going to play out? All these forces working every day, something different, no way to know where the flame is going to go on the barbecue, so to speak.
I think the fact that you even asked that question is a certain Western mindset that every problem can be solved. When I just on the way to the studio, I heard that they finally figured out when the Big Bang took place because they got radio signals from 1.13 billion years ago. And so it took a long time. But apparently some of the
It's a flash. Flash news. You heard it here on ThinkTech.
So I think that we have to, first of all, we're looking at the Middle East, not that we can't do the same paradigm in other places, but I think looking at the Middle East, we have to accept the fact that some problems are insoluble. And then the question becomes, how do you contain them that they don't come here and bother us? Like with the 9/11.
Well, you're right
or
about the
something.
mindset. I mean, I think that the problem with that mindset is reflected in American foreign policy all the time.
I
They
know.
think they get in there, roll up their sleeves, do a little, head banging and arm twisting. It'll all be fine.
It's funny you mention that, because when anybody starts talking to me, especially if I happen to meet, which doesn't happen too often, with some people from a right think tank or something, one of the more conservative groups, and they said to me, we just didn't have enough troops to do it in Iraq. I said, you know what? I'm going to tell you a number. I said, Jews are smart when it comes to numbers. Money, right? I said, remember 400. 400 million? No, I said 400. Well, what does that mean? I said 400 is a number of Arab-speaking interpreters in the American Army who went into Iraq in 2001 or 2 or whenever they went there. I said, that is chutzpah. That is absolute chutzpah. That's gall cheeky. It's spitting in the person's face. 400 people to manage an army of over 100,000 troops, to give commands to potential enemy, to collaborators, and to peaceful people who have nothing to do with anything. How do you say to someone in Arabic, put your hands up? Do you have any weapons if you don't speak Arabic and you have no one to interpret? Do you shoot them?
You step all over
So you
yourself.
shoot them first because they didn't understand you and they just put their hands in their pocket. And then you shoot them, and now you've got 2,000 people from the village coming after you.
Right.
400.
It happened in Afghanistan too.
Yes,
didn't it?
400. So if you're going to go forward, we call it a good war, something that can make some profit, maybe the opium fields, maybe the oil in Iraq or whatever. If you go for a good war, be prepared. Lay it out like you're taking a corporate takeover. Like you were just granted permission to go into Bernie Madoff's files, and dig out all his customer base. Whatever, I'm saying, you go with planning. They didn't get that. So I think that you have to rethink how you do it. So the first thing is, in terms of the Israeli perspective on this, is first of all, you must make sure that there's no anti-Israeli unity among the Arabs facing Israel. Okay? Now, there's no danger right now because they're doing a great job of just being at the. If you look at let's look at the lack of unity. Hamas and the West Bank Palestinians. Okay? Then you've got Syria and everybody else. Then you've got Lebanon. Every other day they either kill one of the Lebanese Druze or Christian leaders or the Sunni leaders, or they kill one of the Hezbollah who's the Shiite. Then you've got Syria, where you've got about 20 different groups fighting the other 19 at the same time. Let's go a little bit. You got Iraq. It's falling apart after all the blood, sweat, tears.
Yeah,
and
that's so tragic.
Because they didn't stay long enough, or they didn't convince the Shiite prime minister to take in the Sunnis as partners. So first the Sunnis depress all the rest of the population, the Shiites, for 40 years. Then they get into power, they depress the other side. They both depress the Kurds. The Kurds finally have enough and say, this is our country, we're going with the other Kurds, we're going to establish eventually a Kurdistan. So that's another group over there. The Kurdistans, they all support other oppressed groups. So they're looking always for Armenians, Jews, Christians. Those are good groups. We're all outsiders. We don't want to have a part of it, even though they're Muslim, in essence, Sunnis. Then the question is, if you're Muslim Sunni, or the Turks Muslim Sunnis? Yeah, but those are fighting against the Kurds. Well, what about the Kurds in Iran? No, but those are Shiite influence. So you can see why it gets some complex, and you can see why every once in a while you get Americans arrested, put in jail, and so on, they disappear because they didn't read the book ahead of time.
I got to take a break here. I'm having a headache. I have to take an aspirin. We'll be right back. This is ThinkTech Hawaii. ThinkTech Talks doing West of Asia with Rafi Boritzer about rockets for Gaza. We'll be right back. I'm Jay Fidell. That's Sharon Moriwaki of the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum. And every Wednesday we have Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy. We've been doing it for some time now, and we have some fantastic guests on there, unbelievable guests who give us insight into what is going on in a very complex, sometimes very confusing, sometimes very disappointing area of progress in the state. So we love doing this. We love meeting them. We love talking to them. We love having their ideas out on the table. So maybe, just maybe, we can all make some sense of what's going on. Sharon, what do you think?
I think that's absolutely correct. We enjoy ourselves meeting with all these people and hearing about the energy and the state of clean energy, and hopefully we advance clean energy for the state. So it's terrific. Join us.
Okay, it's every Wednesday. Okay, Wednesday is Energy Day. Every Wednesday, 4 to 5 p.m. Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, here on ThinkTech Hawaii. We're back. We're live. We're ThinkTech Talks, expanding our horizons globally, and today west of Asia into the Middle East with Rafi Boritzer, talking about the rockets that the Israelis intercepted in the area of Eilat.
In the Red Sea.
In the Red Sea, that were taken to Eilat and were originally bound for Gaza and mischief. So, Rafi, tell us about what we should be concerned about.
Let's see what some of the threats that we really have to consider, especially if you're looking from the Israeli perspective. One, we talked about a coalition among the Arabs. Well, that doesn't look like the coalition is going to build. We look at even the United Arab Emirates, we look at Qatar, Oman, Bahrain. Everybody's got their own agenda over there, and Qatar is kind of taking a pivot. The other ones are against it because they're unhappy. Bahrain is separate; it doesn't have the resources. So we got and Kuwait is on its own. It's always worried about the Iraq being squeezed between the Iraqis and the Iranians. Then you're talking about the loss of technological superiority. Well, in that respect, Israel has technological superiority. It came up with the Iron Dome.
In Gaza,
Well, not only Gaza, the whole country is not covered by Iron Dome. So any missiles, serious missiles that come in and protect.
Yeah, but that surfaced in the Gaza experience.
Right. But you're talking each time you fire one of those, it's $150,000 or more dollars that just vaporize. And if you're shooting in one incident, a few of them, you got a few $1 million, boom, going on. So that's the technological superiority is good. Now, because America finances much of this, and the Israeli researchers do the work and the construction and fabrication, it makes sense. Okay, so we're not worried about that. And then if you're going to have a full-fledged war, and now you're talking, if the Palestinians get discouraged about the lack of a state being able to establish one on the West Bank, this could always be a danger. Will this erupt? We don't know. The peace talks are playing out. Everybody's doing the dance. The question is who will take the bride home. So I don't know. What happens if you lose the United States as a patron?
That's going to have a profound effect on things.
And many people, unfortunately, even though there was an emotional response to the establishment of the State of Israel, emotions don't hold treaties, alliances, and agreements together. They have to work on interests. Now, the interests of America after the debacle in Afghanistan and in Iraq, it's looking more inward. America is more inward, and you don't have to be a Republican or a Democrat to appreciate that Americans say, hey, we got plenty of problems, we want to fix that. The largesse is going to be decreased to some respect. And also, again, the question of policy. America is not going to go to war with Russia over Ukraine, and I don't believe it'll go to war with Iran over Iran getting a nuclear weapon. I just don't think that's going to happen.
That's pretty scary. And maybe that's a real bottom line of all of this, because Iran is rising to positions of greater power and threat in that area.
No, but you know what? Let's look at it the other way. Okay? Did we get so excited when Pakistan got a nuclear weapon?
Pakistan wasn't making threats against us and our...
Oh, yes, it is. You haven't read the
at the
newspaper.
time.
At the time. Well, but I'm saying, but Pakistan is making threats against America all the time.
Anybody with a nuclear weapon can turn bad.
And the North Koreans are threatening Hawaii as we sit here. They say we are the next target for them.
Yeah.
So the question is, possessing a nuclear bomb, and don't know if Israel has one or not, but let's assume that it does for the argument's sake. That doesn't make you warlike. The bomb is not what makes you warlike. It's interests and threats. When you feel threatened. I don't believe, and that's my personal belief, that the Iranians would go to war against Israel just because they had a nuclear weapon. And I don't think they're in a position to threaten, because to threaten, as Putin will find out, I believe, is you have to be able to back your threat. Now, if you want to live in the 13th century again, that's up to you, And then finally, as we just said, a nuclear attack. As I said, I don't believe there'll be a nuclear attack. I would worry if a nuclear weapon did get in the hands of one of the Arab countries. I think that would be an existential danger. I think that Iran is a rational player, and it has nothing to gain from threatening with a nuclear weapon, because I think it only takes one threat. The world would not hesitate to come down completely on Iran if it threatened with a nuclear weapon. And because I think it would come down on the North Koreans. Fascinating, you could say Jet Robinson. The only reason the Americans don't do it is because they've got the Chinese next door, who are much more threatened by Korea than the United States is, and the Russians are more threatened.
Well, it really feels like the winds of war when you put it that way.
It is a little scary, but we live in dangerous time. We live in very, very dangerous times.
And it's all sort of on tripwires. Somebody acts crazy or makes a mistake, before you know it, there's all these automated reactions, just like the guns of August for World War I.
Yeah, what happens is you've got a lot of populations that are unhappy. I think the Chinese, increasingly, their people will feel unhappy that the dream is not continued to be realized. They forget that the one-child policy may have some role to play with it. Same for the Japanese. Don't let foreigners in. Suddenly no one to take care of the old people. I mean, on and on. People don't understand that policies have consequences. And the same in Israel. If you keep having a religious establishment that dictates governmental policy, social policy, then the best and the brightest will leave, and then you've got another religious state in the Middle East that's nothing more.
Yeah, well, something we talked about during the break was the ubiquitousness, if I can use it, of weapons.
Yeah.
So many weapons. Too many weapons. They're everywhere. They're really nasty, high-tech, destructive weapons, and they're easily available. Dealers are dealing them everywhere, and it makes everything a tinderbox that way. Huh?
I want to tell you something. I think that in America, if you had the draft, and everybody had to go to military service till the age of 45, as you do in Israel, I think that people would not be so enamored of weapons. I don't know a single person that's living in Israel that I know personally that has a weapon.
Isn't that interesting?
I don't know anybody.
In the U.S., there's millions of people who care dearly for their weapons, multiple weapons.
And I think it's because it's such a big country, and people read about events, perhaps horrific conflict and events and aggression and death and so on, and they just don't associate it with themselves. Only when it hits home do they associate it. And it's a shame if you have to have thousands killed before you react on an emotional level to weapons control. I mean, how is it that the French and the British and the Germans can live without weapons? I mean, they've been in wars, and
the Canadians.
And the French have just as much as violence in their cities and their place. They've got big immigrant populations.
Right, they got the same issues we do.
Yes, and they don't go around, shooting like. So
well, it doesn't feel like we're in a time which is leading to world peace. It just doesn't feel that way.
But I
mean,
think
it's a dynamic, right? It's moving all the time, and you want to get an idea of the trajectory. Where is it going to wind up?
I think it's a lot of overselling. I think that the West oversold the universal dream to such an extent, trying to look for customers, and now it can't make the
universal dream of what?
Yeah.
Of peace and prosperity.
Peace, prosperity, a car in every garage, a chicken in every pot, a iPad in every pocket, and hey, you can't deliver on it because people have to give something of value to their society or to the global society, and the question is, we are now facing, from my other show, we're facing an issue with the baby boomers and the older populations. If you think we've got a problem, wait till you look at the problem that China is going to have and Japan is going to have. Who's going to take care of all their old people? I saw the Japanese are working on robotics. This is the answer.
The robots to do all the work, yeah.
But someone's even got to control the robots.
Well, sustainability is a factor
Yes.
in all of this. And
And I think the world had better get together on sustainability.
that's true. The world would better get together. I mean, on everything.
Yeah,
On
yeah.
weapons, for example, on war and peace, on trying to, maintain this process you're describing. But the process seems clear. The permanent condition of humankind is that we have these tensions. We have the chessboard always moving. We never know exactly which way the wind will blow and the flame will.
But it's a funny thing, the people with the lowest expectations, the peasants, the falachim, the workers in the fields, they may be better off than all of us. Maybe they will be able to cope with their existence better than any of us in the future.
After the debacle.
Yeah, after the yeah. Because I always say, I'll leave you with these 3 words. You can survive if you know how to catch a fish, bake bread, and grow a tomato.
Onward and upward to the 13th century with Rafi Boritzer here on ThinkTech Hawaii, ThinkTech Talks West of Asia, talking about rockets for Gaza and much more. Aloha, everyone, and tomorrow we'll see you for Seymour's World at 1 p.m. Thank you, Rafi.
Thank you.